Welcome to another desktop virtualization video, and I'll continue looking at some of the business challenges that organizations face where desktop virtualization may help them to address those challenges. And one of those challenges is consumerization, and I'll explain what I mean by consumerization in just one moment. So let's take a look at traditionally how IT have got our desktops to us. Well, it's been through the PC, a Windows-based PC. Up until quite recently, that's how most of us got to our IT resources. And IT have been pretty much in control of the PC after embracing it all those years ago when we saw the PC revolution. They're in control of the security, what applications people can install, what they allow users to do, how it can connect to the network, and basically are able to lock down this computing environment, make it secure, make it fit into the corporate IT environment. And from a user perspective, we used to come to work and get the best IT. The best IT was available to us at work. It was expensive. And if we wanted to get the best IT experience, the latest applications, the latest operating system, we came into work. But these things have been changing over the last few years. Now we can go to the store and buy a whole range of different types of devices, tablets, smartphones, PCs, Macs, all these things we can get ourselves at a very reasonable price from the local consumer store, and often we get a better IT experience when we're at home than we do in the office. In fact, sometimes it feels like going back in time, doesn't it? We go into the office and have to deal with old, seemingly antiquated IT systems, when at home we've got the latest operating system, Windows 7's out, and we're using that all the time on computers at home. Yet a lot of corporate organizations today still haven't moved to Windows 7. So now we're finding ourselves in the position where actually often a user's experience of IT is much better at home with their consumer devices than it is when they're in the office. And let's just take a look at an interesting graph here. If I plot innovation on the vertical axis and time on the horizontal axis, and have a look at the speed of innovation in corporate IT. Contrast. So this is business, I suppose. Label this business, and contrast that to what we see as consumers. And what's happened? This is maybe a straight line, not a very straight line. This is what we're seeing with consumer IT. Is that a gap has arisen? Yeah. What we're seeing at home here is better from a user experience perspective than what we're getting when we go into work. And in fact, I've seen statistics recently that suggest that 90% of us, actually 90% plus of us, are going into work and using our own IT, our own devices in a work environment. Now, if you remember back to some previous videos that I've done, we looked at traditional IT, how that was built out using servers, data stored in the data center, security, a distributed computing system where your IT resources are spread around. And one of the conclusions we drew from that was that these systems are very complex. There are lots of moving parts and lots of interdependency. So what happens when people start bringing their own consumer devices into work? Well, if you're dealing with a traditional computing system, it's very difficult to accommodate these devices, these new operating systems. How do we make them secure? How do they fit into corporate IT as it stands today? I mean, generally, the response from IT, if you wanted to connect a device into a traditional IT system, was no. We've got enough to think about without having to think about letting you bring your own iPad into work and connecting that. However, what if we change the mindset and say, well, let's decide to deliver IT as an on-demand service? In particular, I'm thinking around desktop virtualization. Centralize my desktops in the data center and deliver them as an on-demand service. So I can so I can effectively decouple my desktop from the endpoint device. So when I deliver IT as an on-demand service, it doesn't matter what device my user has. I could seemingly be running Windows 7 on my iPad, although an iPad cannot run Windows 7. Why? Because in my data center, I've got a virtual machine running on some server infrastructure, and then I can deliver out a screen paint to that virtual machine to the endpoint device. So then, when the boss comes in and says, oh look, I've got a new tablet device, a new Mac or whatever, I want to use it at work, can I? The answer can be yes, as long as you can put some sort of standard receiver component on here, something to listen out for your corporate IT services, then you can use a Windows 7 desktop on that iPad because it's delivered as a service from the data center. So here I'm just showing you how desktop virtualization can help embrace the whole idea of consumerization. If you start organizing your IT and start delivering it as a service and using desktop virtualization, then you're in a much better position to start saying yes to all these consumer devices that are coming into your organization. So I hope that's given you a sense of what consumerization is and how IT can start embracing that type of technology.